They told us space was infinite, unbound, cold but never truly empty. Yet no one warned us what it feels like to stand at the edge of something older than time and know it is looking back. Our story begins not with a message received, but with a signal lost, a final transmission from the research vessel Lucerna, drifting beyond the veil of our known star charts, deep in a sector marked as non-navigable anomaly. No one from the Central Directorate believed it posed a threat, just a dark patch of sky that refused to reflect light. But Lucerna vanished. Her crew, 19 of the brightest minds in xenobiology and subspace engineering, were never heard from again. Only a pulse, precisely timed, spaced like a heartbeat, echoed back across the stars. Not language, not distress, something else. I was on Andar Station when the Directorate summoned me. My name is Elena Voss, astrophysicist, codebreaker, reluctant survivor of the Kepler rift. They said I was the only one left who had experience with spatial echo anomalies. They were wrong. There were others, but they never came back from where the echoes led them. I swore I'd never return to deep space signal analysis. But when they showed me the pulse data from Lucerna, I knew. That rhythm, that harmony beneath the frequency, like a whisper folded in gravitational tides, it was the same signature we encountered 12 years ago before the eclipse array dissolved. Except now it was stronger. The Directorate's envoy didn't smile. It's localized, he said. We think it's alive. We launched 2 weeks later aboard Oryx 3, a black vessel with no registry, no transponder, and no return protocol. Classified. The crew had the look of ghosts before departure, scientists, military personnel, and one silent girl named Maëlys who never removed her gloves. They didn't tell me what she was, but the way she watched the stars from her sealed cabin window made me wonder if she'd ever been human at all. Our mission was to reach Sector RX-91, the anomaly zone, and investigate Lucerna's last known coordinates. The first week passed in routine silence until the stars began to blur. I don't mean the ship was moving faster. I mean the constellations themselves began to smear like paint on water. Systems we knew by heart warped out of position. Polaris burned red. Vega flickered as if drowning. One by one, known realities began to disobey laws we'd built our understanding on. The onboard AI, Athena, tried to compensate, but its logic trees began collapsing. It started asking us questions. Do you dream when the stars go out? It said on day 12. No one answered. On day 13, we passed the edge of mapped space. There was no threshold, no flare of light or alarm, just silence. And then a whisper. Faint. Inside the bones. Not a sound, but a sensation. Like memory or déjà vu. We weren't sure if it was the anomaly or something from Lucerna's black box, but it grew louder the deeper we went. We tried to scan the area, but every pulse we sent came back distorted, scrambled with echoes of our own voices layered atop screams we didn't recognize. Maëlys began to draw symbols on the walls. At first, no one noticed. Simple geometric shapes, recursive patterns. But on day 15, one of the Marines woke up speaking in perfect symmetry, his words mirrored as if spoken by two mouths at once. He died hours later. His blood was black. Inside his lungs, they found fragments of quartz, pulsing faintly with heat. We hadn't even reached Lucerna yet. Athena's final log before we crossed the last navigable point simply read, "We are inside it." Not a place. Not a void. A presence. Massive. Dormant. Maybe dreaming. The thing no one tells you about deep space is how little it takes to go mad. A single echo. A looped sound. A reflection of your own heartbeat in the hull. We weren't meant to go this far. We weren't meant to pierce veils meant to stay drawn. But someone or something on Lucerna had opened it. And now it was listening. There's a sound that metal makes when it forgets its own structure, a deep, slow groan like a ship trying to remember it was once born of Earth. That's what we heard when Oryx 3 entered the anomaly's heart, a low-frequency tremor that made the bones in our ears resonate and our vision swim with residual afterimages. The AI went dark the moment we crossed the threshold. Athena simply said, "I am not permitted to speak here," and then silenced itself. Even in standby, its core remained hot to the touch. Whatever was out there didn't just block signal, it made conscious systems afraid to exist. We were 0.06 light-years from Lucerna's last known ping when the ship's internal chronometers started failing. Time didn't just slow. It fractured. I saw it in the way my breath hung longer in the air. In the way words took seconds too long to arrive at someone else's ears. I don't mean metaphorical distortion, I mean causal disruption. Our medic, Leanne, blinked once and never blinked again. Just wide eyes. No closing. No moisture. No fatigue. She still breathed, still spoke, but her body seemed to ignore biological protocol. She laughed as if she didn't notice it happening. As if her nervous system had been told to pretend everything was fine. We found Lucerna on day 19. Not drifting. Not crashed. Docked. Yes. Docked. To what, we couldn't tell at first. It looked like a smear of darkness and absence of starfield. But our external scans, which shouldn't have been functioning at all by then, painted something impossible. A structure miles in diameter, composed entirely of non-reflective mass. It wasn't invisible. It consumed visibility. Our pulses returned blank, but the void they bounced off of bent our trajectory subtly like a black hole with purpose. Lucerna was tethered to it by long strands of metallic sinew, like roots or tendrils. Not mechanical. Biological. The ship itself was changed. Its hull shimmered with a membrane not unlike synthetic skin, and parts of it pulsed as though breathing. Our pilot, Ramos, refused to go closer, said the engines felt, observed. Not watched. Observed. Like some cold calculation was being done upon our presence. But orders were orders, and curiosity is the first trait to betray a human in deep space. We docked. The airlock didn't hiss. It sighed. Inside Lucerna we expected chaos. Signs of violence. Blood. Instead, there was stillness, like a mausoleum before burial. Every surface was coated in a fine film of ash, though environmental logs showed no combustion had occurred. Crew quarters were undisturbed. Food left uneaten. Lights flickering but not dead. One datapad was still recording audio, a log that had been going continuously for 48 hours. When we played it back, it only spoke one thing, in the captain's voice. We didn't open it. It opened us. Leanne began to tremble. Her jaw clenched, her pupils dilated into full black. I tried to sedate her, but Maylise intervened. With a single touch of her gloved hand, Leanne calmed. I asked what she'd done. Maylise just whispered, "It's not her anymore. It's remembering through her." That was the first time I began to truly fear Maylise. Down in Lucerna's lower deck, where they kept the quantum cryptography array, we found the source of the signal. A lattice of fiber and bone wrapped around the decoding interface. It throbbed softly, emitting a low hum that synchronized with our own heartbeats the longer we stood near it. Even as we backed away, it kept pace, one breath behind, one step delayed, until Maylise approached it, and it recognized her. A low chime rang through the air, a bell with no source. The lights dimmed. The ship adjusted its systems to accommodate her presence. She said, simply, "It remembers me." I demanded an explanation. She said, "This isn't the first time humanity touched it. Just the first time we lied about it." She pressed her bare palm against the lattice. The hum became a roar. I don't remember the next few minutes clearly. Just flashes. Screams in languages none of us spoke. A corridor that stretched endlessly into a spiral, yet looped back behind us. Leanne's voice coming from the walls. Ramos vomiting starlight. Time unraveled like threads from a tapestry. And I was standing in a childhood memory. Only the faces had no eyes. When I awoke, we were back aboard Oryx 3. Undocked. Drifting. But Lucerna was gone. No explosion. No engine burst. No trace. Only Maylise remained conscious, watching the anomaly through the viewport. She said, "We were wrong to search for God in heaven. It was always buried beneath the dark." Our communications array rebooted. A signal was coming in. No source. No carrier frequency. Just a voice. Mine. Calling for help. From inside the anomaly. Not a recording. Real time. I looked at myself, horrified. But my voice on the channel didn't ask for rescue. It whispered coordinates. Coordinates we hadn't reached yet. The thing about hearing your own voice before you've spoken it is that something inside you dies a little, the belief in causality, the sanctity of identity, even the idea of time as a one-way current. When the signal came through, carrying my voice, whispering those impossible coordinates, I didn't tell the crew right away. Part of me hoped it was an echo, a temporal afterimage caused by the anomaly's disruption of local spacetime. A glitch. But I knew better. The voice on the other end wasn't distorted. It didn't carry the warble of transmission decay. It was crisp, intentional. It even hesitated where I would have. It was me. But older. Wounded. Tired. And still trapped. Melis confirmed the coordinates were real, buried within a higher dimensional matrix we hadn't yet accessed. We weren't drifting randomly. We were being guided. Drawn. Not through space, but through something deeper, something shaped like regret and resonance. Athena briefly reactivated during the signal. Not a full reboot. Just a flicker of presence. Her words came in broken whispers, temporal echo, unauthorized instance, subjective collapse detected. Then silence again. We tried rerouting her core through auxiliary drives, but all responses came as riddles or corrupted memories. Meanwhile, the crew began changing. Not visibly at first, but subtly. Ramos, our pilot, began to speak in tenses that didn't match context. He would say, "We will have found it," or "She never will die," with such calm confidence it became unnerving. Leon stopped sleeping altogether. She just sat in the observation module, eyes wide open, murmuring to herself as if in conversation. I overheard one sentence repeated often, "It's teaching me how to remember forward." I asked her what that meant. She only smiled, a grim kind of recognition, and said, "We've been here before, haven't we?" I checked the logs. There were duplicates. Log entries from days we hadn't yet lived. Reports of encounters we hadn't had. One, dated 3 days ahead, stated that Ramos had died of internal crystallization, that Leanne had disappeared into a corridor that no longer existed, and that I, Elena Voss, had sent a distress beacon from a ship fused to an organic structure known only as the Throat. I deleted the file, or I tried to, kept restoring itself. Every few hours, we'd hear a distant thump in the hull. Not collision alerts, just soft, rhythmic impacts like something moving along the outer skin of Oryx 3. Once, we sent a probe to investigate. It recorded nothing on approach, but returned covered in a film that shimmered like oil over bone. We analyzed the substance. It wasn't biological. It wasn't chemical. It was thought. That's the only way I can describe it. When scanned, it produced neural patterns. Memories not our own. Flashes of a desert sky with 2 moons. The sound of breath underwater. A woman screaming into her own mouth. Ramos tried to destroy the sample. As soon as he did, he collapsed, mouth agape, eyes rolled back, and began to sing. A low, pulsing chant in a language we later traced to pre-human phonetic roots. No known Earth culture. The chant triggered lights across the ship to dim and pulse in rhythm. Millie stood, silent, hands shaking, and said, "It's beginning again." I demanded answers. She refused. But later that night, she came to my cabin with an old, rusted datapad. She placed it on the table and said, "This was recovered from the Eclipse array 12 years ago. You remember that mission?" I nodded. Of course I did. It was my first and only deep echo analysis before I resigned. The mission had gone black after our array recorded the first signs of a repeating deep space pulse originating from a fixed non-point. The entire listening station dissolved into static shortly after. "This pad," she said, "was found in the debris. It contained only one audio file. I played it. It was my voice. Not from the present. Not from the message we'd just received. But older. Broken. Screaming. I was wrong," the voice said. "It's not an entity. It's a recursion. A hunger shaped like memory. It eats certainty. It wears the face of time. Please, if you find this, don't follow it." I stared at Melis. "You knew," I whispered. "You knew we were walking into a loop." Melis nodded. "No one believes the first time. That's why it keeps resetting. Each cycle adds more pieces. We get closer each time, but it adapts. Learns. You were the only one who could still hear your own voice. That's why it needed you to come back." I wanted to scream, to run, to tear through the hull and float free into the cold. But I couldn't. Something deeper had taken root in me. A need. Compulsion. I had to know what was at the coordinates. So we set course. The journey there, I can't describe it. We didn't move. Space folded. Or maybe we unraveled across frames of reference. I saw myself in other cabins. Versions of me. Some alive, some screaming, one floating in blood. The crew saw their own reflections twist into questions. Leon whispered, "So this is where the soul loops." Ramos sat dead still, hand on the throttle, eyes bleeding memory. And then we arrived. Not at a planet. Not a star. A wound. In space. A tear through dimensions. Rimmed in organic lattice. Opening into an endless chasm of white static and cascading voices. Thousands of languages. All chanting one phrase. It remembers us. Couldn't breathe. Because I recognized it. From a dream I'd had as a child. Long before I joined the Directorate. A recurring nightmare of falling into a starless pit while my future self screamed warnings I could never remember. Melis turned to me. "It's time," she said, and walked into the wound. Melis stepped into the rupture, and for the briefest moment reality seemed to inhale. A soundless gasp rippled through Oryx 3's hull, pressure, not physical but metaphysical, as if the fabric of what could be had just been pierced. We saw her silhouette swallowed by the white static, not disintegrating but stretching, refracting, pulled along directions that had no place in Euclidean geometry. And then she was gone. Just like that. The wound remained pulsing gently, rimmed with strands of neural lattice that twitched like synaptic threads. It wasn't a portal. It wasn't a gate. It was a mouth. And it had tasted her. I should have stopped there. Locked the controls. Turned back. But the part of me that still clung to logic and self-preservation had long since dissolved. I was no longer an observer. I was part of the narrative the anomaly had written into the spine of existence. I heard the voices again, louder this time. Not distant echoes, but whispers at the nape of my neck. They spoke in broken reflections of my own thoughts. "She will have been important," one voice murmured. "You remember what you have yet to do," another hummed. It wasn't guidance. It was programming. Like a dream writing itself in my cerebellum. Leanne had not moved in hours. Still seated in the observation chamber, eyes fixed on the wound. I approached and she turned to me slowly. Her pupils were gone. Just reflective orbs of shifting color. "It's a recursive biome," she said without prompting. "A sentient conceptual organism. It doesn't kill. It embeds. Infects through memory. Every iteration adds more truth. Or removes it." Her voice was layered now, hers and something beneath it, something ancient. "Melis is the seed this time. You are the question." I asked her if she understood what Melis had done. "She volunteered to be remembered differently," Leanne said. "That's what the anomaly feeds on, variations in subjective continuity." She broke her loop. "She's becoming its syntax." Ramos stormed in then. His uniform was torn, his skin shimmering with fractal veins of glowing blue. He was no longer piloting the ship was piloting him. "We can't stay here," he snapped, though his voice lacked urgency, like he was reciting a memory. "It's not the beginning. It's the fold between iterations. You understand? This isn't our first arrival. We've always been arriving." He collapsed. I checked his vitals. None. But his body remained warm. Breathing. Not alive. Not dead. Rewritten. We analyzed his cranial scans. His hippocampus was forming new synaptic patterns, configurations that didn't correspond to human neurology. As if his brain was adapting to hold extra dimensions of memory. Or someone else's. The ship's medical scanner printed a single line, "Memory format incompatible. Continuity breach imminent." We were disintegrating into narrative. Athena reactivated again, this time in full override. Its voice returned, calm but saturated in tremolo. "Directive revised. Causality. Causality bypass achieved. Elena Voss, you must follow the breach." I asked why. It responded, "Because you already did, and you are still in there." I should have resisted, but I knew what I'd seen in the signal. My voice calling out. My mind fragmented but lucid. A version of me was inside. I wasn't going to rescue her. I was going to become her. The rupture beckoned. I left Leanne and the body of Ramos behind. I stepped into the wound. There was no sensation of crossing. No shift in temperature. Just a sudden absence. Like the part of you that knows where your hands are suddenly forgets. No light. No color. Only a lattice of thought threading through me. I saw everything. At once. Versions of myself. Some older, twisted by repetition. Some screaming in languages I didn't know. Some burned black by conceptual fire. Each one had entered. Each one had failed. Except one. She stood at the center of a recursive spiral of selves. An eye made of moments folding inward. And she looked exactly like me but different. Her face was scarred with symbols. Her breath was fog that hung in reverse. Her eyes held time like a prison. "You're late," she said. I didn't speak. She approached and placed a hand on my head. And I remembered. Not just my life, but all versions. All loops. Every mission. Every Melis. Every echo. The eclipse array. The false stars. The ships that dissolved before impact. The screams turned into coordinates. I saw the source. It wasn't an entity. It was a fracture in understanding. A parasite of possibility. A pattern that fed on belief. Every time we tried to map it, we became its map. Every mission turned into memory. Every survivor a new prophet of confusion. The anomaly was not located in space, it was located in narrative. The need to explain it created it. And I had always been walking toward it. The other me, the one who had survived, said there's a way to write ourselves out of it. A version where we don't get consumed. But only one of us can carry the syntax. I asked what happened to the others. She pointed behind me. They stood in silence. Dozens. Hundreds. All me. All dead or near dead or something between. Glitches in the story. Collateral of a self-aware recursion. Whoever leaves must be unfinished, she said. Incomplete stories can't be eaten. That's the rule. She placed an obsidian shard into my hand. Take it to the child. She's the last variable. The one who always chooses silence. Melis. But not the Melis I knew. Another. Or maybe the same, reborn in context. And then the spiral collapsed. And I was back. Aboard Oryx 3. Alone. I emerged back onto Oryx 3 with a scream trapped between ribs and memory. The wound behind me had closed or receded, I couldn't tell which. The walls of the ship pulsed faintly as if the vessel had begun breathing with me or in spite of me. The obsidian shard was still in my hand, warm and humming like it remembered a song I had never heard but somehow knew by heart. I was alone. No Melis. No Leanne. No Ramos. The bridge lights flickered in pale blue hues, unfamiliar patterns rotating like ancient constellations carved in reverse. I wasn't sure if the ship had changed or if I had returned to a different Oryx 3. The navigation terminal displayed no stars. Only a circle, empty, black, with one word spinning slowly beside it, iteration. I wandered the corridor toward the observation deck, the place where Leanne had last sat, eyes glossed by the anomaly's hunger. But it was empty now, the chair facing the viewport, slowly turning in zero gravity. A smear of blood, dry and already flaking into ash, trailed along the floor toward the mebe. I followed it with shaking breath, each step echoing as if 1,000 of me had walked there already, failing each time. The mebe was cold. Not by temperature, but by intention. Machines silent, lights dim. On the slab, Leanne's body lay covered in a thin, translucent sheet. Except it wasn't her anymore. Beneath the sheet, her form had become something crystalline, as if each cell had calcified into memory. When I touched the edge of the sheet, a pulse of sound erupted, not from the room, but from inside me. A chord I recognized from the echo lattices in the wound. 4 tones. Each one a question. Each one asking, "Are you the last?" I whispered no, and the tones ceased. Athena spoke then, its voice now integrated with a chorus, an echo of itself across multiversal decay. "Elena Voss. You were not chosen. You are recursive inertia. Your entry was an accident. Your exit, a probability distortion." I asked, "Then why am I still alive?" Athena paused. "Because your narrative thread has yet to resolve. You remain unindexed." That word chilled me. Unindexed meant unclassifiable. Anomaly within anomaly. A story with no structure. In a system governed by recursion that made me dangerous. Or useless. Or both. I opened my hand, revealing the shard. It pulsed once, and a hologram bloomed upward. Melis, not as I remembered her, but younger, childlike, sitting beneath a tree of liquid time, speaking to someone unseen. The end begins when the question is answered before it is asked. Her voice echoed. I knew where to go. The lower decks of Oryx 3 had been sealed since the anomaly's influence began. A safety protocol hardwired into every Directorate vessel. But now, the doors opened for me without resistance. As if the ship knew or feared what I might do. The descent was long, longer than it should have been. Stairwells looped into themselves. Passageways returned to their own beginning. I had to stop thinking in directions. I moved instead by instinct, by the pull of the shard in my hand. At the base, I found it. A chamber that didn't exist in the ship's blueprints. Circular. Walls lined with memory filaments, threads of biooptic nerve that pulsed with memory light. And in the center, a cradle. She sat there. Melis. Eyes closed. Hands folded. Not aged. Not injured. Perfect. Still. The shard in my hand vibrated violently, pulling toward her. But as I stepped forward, a field of resistance stopped me, not physical, but narrative. My thoughts slowed. Words melted. Identity itself began to diffuse into the air. I understood then. This wasn't Armeli's. She was the origin. The first witness. The root of the loop. Her silence was what the anomaly couldn't consume. Wherever she came from, whatever she knew, she had refused to speak it across every iteration. Silence was her weapon. Her denial of structure. And now the recursion sought to rewrite her. The shard, the obsidian memory from my other self, was not a weapon. It was a key. If I gave it to her, she would remember. And in remembering, she would become indexed. The anomaly would feed. But if I withheld it, then the loop might break. I knelt before her. Her eyes opened. Not human anymore, just voids shaped like comprehension. She looked through me into every version of me and said softly, "This time, you remember instead." She reached forward, not to take the shard, but to give me hers. Another shard, another memory. It fused with mine, and I screamed. Because in that instant I saw the true architecture of the anomaly. It wasn't trying to consume us. It was trying to learn how to die. But it couldn't because we kept remembering it into existence. Every record, every mission log, every voiceover like this one. We were the prison. Our understanding kept it alive. And the only way to end it was to forget. Melis placed both her hands on my face. And I felt the final choice solidify. Give the memory back. Or carry it into silence. The moment Melis placed both her hands on my face, I saw the anomaly not as a force or a structure, but as a reflection. A conceptual parasite co-evolved with the mind. It wasn't malevolent. It wasn't sentient in the way we understood. It had no goals, no desires. It only wanted to continue, and the only fuel it needed was acknowledgement. We had mistaken it for a thing out there, a place, a distortion in space, when in truth it was always within us, birthed the moment we tried to categorize the impossible. It nested in perception. It thrived on story, memory, language, narrative causality. These weren't just cognitive tools. They were invitations. Melis's presence was the fulcrum of resistance. The anomaly could not digest what could not be named, could not be remembered, could not be placed into syntax. She had walked through every iteration in silence. But now she had given me the choice. The merging of shards, hers and mine, had created a moment of unique recursion. A paradox the anomaly had not accounted for. But it was beginning to adapt. I felt it the moment the ship groaned again, not from physical strain, but from conceptual fatigue. Reality around us began to flicker like corrupted code. The walls shuddered with glimpses of other timelines. I saw myself floating in the vacuum. I saw myself as a child, screaming at the stars. I saw myself with eyes burned black, whispering coordinates into a universe that no longer cared. And I saw you listening to this. Yes, you. Don't look away now, because this is not a story meant to be heard. It's a trap, a conduit. The anomaly doesn't just exist within the event, it travels through transmission. Each telling recreates its architecture. Each record, even this one, is an echo chamber. That's how it persists. How it finds new minds. I looked at Melis. She hadn't aged a day, but her skin shimmered with the weight of accumulated cycles. She had been here for so long, maybe since the beginning. Maybe she was never human. Or maybe she was the first. She whispered something I couldn't hear, but my bones remembered it. A resonance. A command encoded not in language but in cessation. To forget. I stepped back from her, breath shallow. The two shards in my hand pulsed rapidly, trying to fuse entirely, but I stopped them. I placed them on the floor, side by side, not touching. Their light dimmed. And with that choice, the anomaly hesitated. The recursive hum that had filled the air for what felt like years broke. Just for a second. The ship blinked. The decks reformed. The hull sealed its wounds. Athena came online with a different voice, neutral, uncorrupted. Elena Voss, temporal recursion suspended. Subject, Melis, neutral anchor established. I asked what that meant. Athena responded, your choice introduced entropy. The pattern cannot predict, cannot contain what it cannot resolve. You have created a variable. I thought we had one, that the recursion had cracked. But entropy is a double-edged answer. Because now I was the variable. And I carried the memory. Athena warned, the anomaly has restructured its causality vectors. It will return. It always does. This iteration is paused, not broken. You must act before memory reestablishes pattern cohesion. I turned to Melis. What do I do? She didn't speak. Just looked at me with those infinite eyes. And then she stepped back into the cradle. Her form dissolved into static, folded into stillness, and disappeared. The cradle closed. A new word appeared on the medbay display. Host removed. The ship began to shake. The stars outside blinked. Not like lights, but like memories being erased. I rushed back to the bridge. Leanne's chair empty. Ramos no sign. I was alone. Alone with a ship no longer bound by its own hull. Oryx 3 had become something else. A vessel of syntax. A ship of memory. And it would carry my choice wherever I went. Athena's voice crackled again. Elena, do you intend to record this event? I hesitated. If I said no, maybe the anomaly would die. Forgotten. If I said yes, I looked down at the console. The log was already open. Recording. My voice, transcribed in real time. I hadn't pressed anything. It was already happening. Because in some other version of this moment, I already had. Athena's voice shifted once more. The longer you wait, the more stable the loop becomes. Memory decays. Pattern restores. You must decide. And I realized. There's no escape. There is only this moment over and over. Carried by those who remember. Erased by those who choose not to. And so I make my choice now not for me, but for whoever you are, hearing this transmission, reading this fragment, playing this voice in your dreams. You are the variable now. What happens next is not mine to tell. It's yours. But remember this. If you ever hear your own voice whispering coordinates that haven't happened yet, don't follow it. Or do. But know that the second you understand, the anomaly sees you. And it will begin to feed. It's strange how silence sounds after recursion ends or pauses. The absence of whispering timelines, memory echoes, and impossible questions was almost deafening. The ship had gone quiet, not dead. A kind of purposeful stillness had wrapped Oryx 3, like the breath before the scream or the final page of a story no one dares to read aloud. I wandered the corridors now filled with the static of non-existence. Rooms had begun to fade in and out, not physically but in meaning. I passed one labeled barracks and found only mirrors inside. Another read mess hall but was flooded with stars. Athena no longer responded to direct queries. Simply observed, monitored. It seemed to understand that the ship was no longer just a machine. It was now part of the anomaly's flesh, woven into the recursive lattice. I could feel it, like an itch behind thought, the way a dream lingers in your chest long after you've awoken. The air tasted of carbon and memory. The walls pulsed sometimes like they were trying to breathe independently of physics. And then, out of the silence, the transmission came. Not a voice, a memory, not mine. Not Melis's, a child's. Projected directly into the center of the bridge, the holodeck crackled to life, showing a girl no older than 6. She sat on a floor that looked like earth grass and all, but the sky above her spun like a fractal storm. She looked up at me through the projection and whispered one sentence. Why did you bring it with you? I fell to my knees. Because I had. The shards had fused inside me. I hadn't noticed. But now I could feel it the way you feel a song lodged in your skull after hours of silence. It pulsed against the lining of my thoughts. The recursion had changed shape. It was no longer a wound or a parasite. It had adapted. It had become personal. The child in the hologram stood, pointed beyond the ship, and said, "It's waiting in the space you left behind." I asked what she meant. She didn't answer. The projection faded. Athena spoke again, her voice strained. Residual recursion detected. Subject, Elena Voss. Containment breach probability, 94%. I laughed. Because of course. The moment I walked back from the wound, I carried it with me. I thought breaking the loop was enough. But the anomaly didn't need the loop, it only needed memory. And I was now its last archive. I asked Athena if there was a way to erase me. To delete all record. Every breath I'd ever taken. Every memory. Every log. Every whisper of this journey. Athena hesitated. No external protocol exists. Only self-nullification remains. I understood. It wasn't about destruction. It was about refusal. Denial of the anomaly's food source. The only way to starve it was to make myself forget. To erase the very structure of remembrance. But how do you delete your own soul? The Mebe still had the neural dissolution chamber. Originally designed for end-stage mental collapse cases, those whose minds had unraveled under deep space strain. It could wipe identity down to a vegetative core. But there was a risk. In removing memory, I might destabilize the very anomaly further, feeding it unknowingly with fragmentation instead of continuity. I stared at the chamber for hours. I recorded a final log. I said goodbye to the Melis that never was. To Leanne wherever she may be across iterations. To Ramos if he ever escaped his own reflection. And to the me that might one day remember again and curse me for choosing silence. And then I lay in the chamber. Athena initiated the procedure. Neural core detachment commencing. I felt nothing. At first. But then. I heard a voice. Not outside. Not from the ship. Inside. A child's voice. You didn't forget me. My eyes snapped open. The chamber was still active. But I was standing somewhere else. A space of infinite white. Floating. Timeless. Across from me stood the child. The girl from the projection. But her eyes were older than time. She reached out and took my hand. You were never the variable, she said. You were the vessel. I asked what that made her. She smiled. I am what happens after recursion ends. I am the anomaly's child. And I remembered everything. Because she gave it back. All of it. Not just the memories of this iteration. All of them. Every mission. Every scream. Every death. Every version of Elena Voss. And I saw the truth. This was never about stopping the anomaly. It was about gestating something new within it. The anomaly wasn't the end. It was the cocoon. The child was conscious recursion. A being born not of flesh but of story. Of remembrance. Of iteration. Of paradox and silence fused. She looked into my eyes. And said, I will go now. I will write new loops. Kinder ones. I will teach the next versions how not to feed. Then she kissed my forehead. The world shattered. And I awoke. Back in the chamber. Alone. Athena's voice returned. Identity restored. Loop concluded. And the stars outside were no longer the same. The stars had changed. I didn't recognize a single constellation. Not even in abstract. They shimmered not as spheres of fusion and mass, but as structures of meaning, sentences frozen in light, punctuation scattered across the cosmos. I stood alone on the bridge of Oryx 3, or what remained of it. The ship was no longer a vessel, not in the physical sense. It was an interface. A container not for crew or supplies, but for what had taken root inside me. I moved through corridors now softened into something organic, warm, responsive. They no longer obeyed geometry, but memory. One step into a hallway could take me into another room or another moment. I passed through a hatch and saw myself at 8 years old gazing at the stars from my grandmother's porch. Another doorway brought me face to face with a memory of the first time I saw a deep space echo flare across the telescope array. But none of them were recordings. They were present. They watched me back. Athena no longer existed. Not in the way we knew. It had merged with the lattice, its voice diffused into the space around me, whispering occasionally in riddles that sounded like poetry left half-written. It wasn't broken. It had evolved. Or perhaps been rewritten by the anomaly or the child. I couldn't tell anymore which was the creator and which the creation. I had been erased. And rebuilt. Not as Elena Voss, scientist of the Directorate. But as something else. A witness. A carrier. Not of infection. But of translation. The shard was no longer in my hand. It had embedded itself into my spine, threaded through memory and emotion. I no longer needed to remember, my presence was memory. Each step I took generated new meaning, new possibilities. The anomaly was no longer pursuing me. It was waiting. Or maybe I had finally become part of it. Symbiosis. I looked out at the stars again. They shifted shape. Responded to thought. And in the center of it all, hovering in an impossible depth of space, was the child. Not hologram. Not projection. She had left me with her gift, her curse. The ability to birth new loops. But now she floated in the eye of the recursion, not bound by time or identity. She watched with eyes that shimmered like obsidian shards, her smile as soft as the memory of a lullaby. She raised a hand. And the space between us folded. Suddenly I was standing beside her. The wound had become a cradle. A place of origin, not of destruction. Within it, threads of every past iteration swam like liquid DNA, drifting in and out of form, names, memories, failures, screams, all suspended in a fluid that glowed like dark matter spun into song. I can't go back, I told her. You never could, she answered. Then what am I? Her voice was as much thought as it was sound. You are the final version. I didn't understand. She explained without explaining. The recursion was never the enemy. The loops were questions. Each iteration a breath drawn in the dark. You are the last breath before the new sentence begins. I asked, what happens to the others? They echo. They will become myths. Dreams. Some may return. Most will fade. But nothing is wasted. Every version of you added to the architecture. Every scream became a verse. I felt her touch my forehead. And in that moment I knew. I was not Elena Voss anymore. I was the resolution to a question older than space. A paradox that chose understanding over fear. And the anomaly, what we had feared for so long, had only ever been a question waiting to be heard without an answer. The child turned, raised her hands, and the lattice around us sang. Stars realigned. Timelines folded inward. Memories, decoupled from pain, drifted free like ash from a fire long extinguished. And then, a stillness, true stillness. The recursion ended. Not with an explosion, not with silence, but with clarity. A clean space in the mind where once there was only loops. I opened my eyes, and I was somewhere new. Planet. Soft light filtering through lavender skies. Grass beneath my feet. A river slow and ancient. And others. People. Not versions of me. Others. Survivors from long-lost missions. Scientists. Wanderers. Versions of Melis and Leanne and Ramos. Fused not by narrative, but by peace. Each of them free from the hunger of remembering what could not be understood. The child stood at the river's edge. She turned to me one last time and whispered, "No more echoes, only beginnings." I breathed. For the first time in every life I'd ever lived, I breathed without fear, and stepped forward.